Alex and I both agree that Michael Penix Jr. is the next franchise quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. But franchise quarterbacks, while they can hide a lot of deficiency and certainly take the Falcons to a relatively close to their ceiling, right? They can be a 12-win team if they can get a little bit better defensively and make a run in the playoffs like we saw when Matt Ryan. But if you want to reach the absolute tip top of the mountain, you have to have everything pulling on the same right. Everybody has to be doing their job. Most importantly, outside of the quarterback, the head coach and the GM, two guys that were disasters in 2024. Now, Terry Fontenot has been a disaster for much more than 2024. He's been here for 4 seasons, does not have a single winning record or a postseason berth on his resume, has one of the worst draft resumes you could possibly imagine. I think every one of you out there could go out there blindly picking players and could have done a better job than the Atlanta Falcons. That's how bad they have been in the draft when they've had 3 straight top 10 draft picks, which also matters in the later rounds. Remember, you're also picking in the top 10 of the second round, the top 10 of the third round, the top 10 of the fourth round. And not only that, he set us up to where we only have 4 picks this year in 2025. So it's not like he's going to do a lot better. Now, Michael Penix could save these people's jobs, and that's kind of the worry of all of this. But who do you think? Who do you think needs to be the same? Someone is going to get fired this year, maybe multiple people. Who do you think is most likely, deserving, any way you want to put it, deserves to be fired for this disaster of a collapse that the Falcons have undergone in 2024, 2025?
I don't think anybody gets fired other than Jimmy Lake. Now, that doesn't mean that's what I think should happen, but I think that just from how Arthur Blank has operated since he's owned this team, Terry Fontenot's kind of, he's kind of wiggled his way into the inner circle. I mean, why else was he kept when Arthur Smith was fired? I mean, he's clearly, in the right people's ear, a la Rich McKay, if I had to guess. And Raheem Morris, though incredibly disappointing, sub 500, no playoffs. A couple months ago had a 6-3 record. All we had to do was go 500, and we would have been in the playoffs. This follows a whole offseason of Raheem Morris going, we had better quarterback play, I wouldn't be here. The goal is to win the NFC South. All this rah talk for us to just be in the exact same spot as we have. The only true thing they said, and I thought this was funny, we aren't picking in the top 10 again. That was true. They called their shot there. But we're still under 500. You just improved by 1 game despite an enormous amount of investment in the roster. This roster, I don't want to hear anything about comparing Arthur Smith's situation in year 1 to Raheem Morris's situation in year 1. In fact, I don't want to hear Arthur Smith's situation in any 3 years compared to the situation Raheem Morris found himself in. From top to bottom, this roster was infinitely better than anything Arthur Smith had, including at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins definitely had that 5-game stretch there. He was absolutely dismal. Oh, wait, whose decision was it to keep rolling Kirk Cousins when we had this guy rolling around in practice? Let me remind you, that's Raheem Morris's decision. Michael Penix probably could have been inserted several weeks earlier, maybe gotten another win, maybe got another 2 wins. Maybe we don't have drop passes and interceptions later on. There's more chemistry between the receivers, and maybe we're in the playoffs if that happens. Kirk Cousins was Terry Fontenot's decision, or maybe it was collaborative, whatever it was. I'm going to put that on.
They hide behind the collaborative word,
I'm putting,
so nobody has to take responsibility.
I'm going to put that on whoever the hell's decision. I'm going to put that on the GM because ultimately that's the GM's job, is to make a decision like that. So if that is indeed what Terry Fontenot's job title says, I'm going to put that on the GM. That was an absolute disaster. We said this when it happened. You don't make $100 million mistakes in a lot of businesses. But hey, guess what? The Atlanta Falcons don't appreciate anybody taking accountability.
We'll set new trends.
Because guess what? If Arthur Blank has to hold Terry Fontenot accountable, then he has to hold himself accountable, and he doesn't want to do that. So that's it. Like we say, it always starts from the top down. It was a dismal, embarrassing season for the Atlanta Falcons, especially with the way they started 6-3. The only 2 wins down the stretch came against the Giants, who might be the only team in a worse position than the Atlanta Falcons in terms of management and run, and the Raiders, which they barely won, and Desmond Ridder was starting. I mean, it was absolutely pathetic. And those last 2 weeks, the way Raheem Morris coached against the Washington Commanders and then tried to defend it with his bull crap was absolutely embarrassing for a head coach. Take some accountability. Terry Fontenot, take some accountability. We'll finally hear from Terry Fontenot, the ghost of the Atlanta Falcons, who hasn't said a word the entire season, despite Kirk Cousins being one of the biggest disasters over the last 5 years in the NFL. We'll hear from Raheem Morris, who will assuredly keep his job, even though I think there's a ton of evidence to suggest he's not the guy. He has 4 years and he's well under 500. This isn't his first rodeo. Still didn't know when to call a timeout. Did learn against Carolina. I'm not going to give him too much praise for that because his defense gave up 44 points to the Carolina Panthers. Once again, failed to get off the bus in a must-win situation. It's embarrassing. What does Raheem Morris do for this team? He was a defensive course coach before this. He made a terrible hire in Jimmy Lake, who I agree with you, is the only guy that is going to get fired in all this because someone has to be the scapegoat. Poor guy who never had any NFL experience and never should have been hired in the first place. Raheem Morris, that's your fault. What does Raheem Morris do? He started helping out with the defense. They looked better, and then they go up 44 points in a must-win game to a crappy offense, and Bryce Young make him look like Steve Young in his prime. I mean, what has he done? The answer is nothing. If you're defending Raheem Morris, that's fine. You just want to give him an extra year. But guess what? We're going to see the same crap next year. I'm just telling you, I'm warning you. I don't understand where we have to see another year. We have to see another year. He's going to get better. The guy has been in this league for 20 years.
Yeah, what more do you need to see? What, a full season of Michael Penix Jr.? Let me just explain, what is going to eventually cost the Falcons games. Because next year I would be shocked if we didn't make the playoffs because, again, I do agree that Michael Penix raises the floor of this football team, but you're missing a key point. We're not just trying to get to the playoffs. We're trying to eventually, hopefully, have a crack at a Super Bowl every single year. And Raheem Morris is the biggest single roadblock in that happening. And I would even argue the clock management didn't get much better against the Panthers because we just sold with 30 seconds left in the game. I know that we had a long way to go, but you've got a guy in Michael Penix who can make all the throws. We had 2 timeouts, and we decided to just mail it in. And I want to say the biggest problem I have with people who are defending Raheem Morris or Terry Fontenot is I want to ask you this question, and then if you still think that we should have keep both of them, then there's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise. Had the Buccaneers lost to the Saints, which is what the Falcons needed to get into the playoffs, and the Falcons still lose to the Panthers, does that change your mind? I know the Bucs won, and we're playing this hypothetical game. It's hard to live in hypotheticals, but we should be operating under the understanding that the Falcons were in a must-win situation, and we just lost to one of the worst teams in football because our head coach's specialty faltered.
Yeah, and that goes back to it. What does he do? He doesn't call plays. He's a defensive mind that hired a terrible defensive coach and took over, and this defense took a massive step back. His decision-making, and not just from the time management, his decision-making on fourth down, the times that he went for it, the times that he didn't, there was no rhyme or reason.
There was like a drunk guy at a blackjack table.
There was absolutely no rhyme or reason. And listen, guess what? At the end of that Panthers game, you now know at the end, because trust me, they were scoreboard watching. They said it on the broadcast that they knew that the Saints had a 10-point lead. So they were playing with under the assumption for sure that they might have a chance, and they still went out there and gave up 44 points. But by the end of that game, the season is over. And guess what? He doesn't go for 2. This offense has literally, the defense can't stop anything. It hasn't stopped anything the entire game. The offense hasn't been stopped the entire game. Bijan Robinson is not getting touched before 5 yards after the line of scrimmage. Michael Penix is playing as good as you possibly can at the quarterback position. You have really nothing to play for, and you still don't go for 2. But you go for it on fourth down every single time during the course of the season, whether Kirk Cousins is the quarterback or Michael Penix. It makes no sense. And this is just another example of Raheem Morris. There's no plan. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no real preparation for these moments. And you can be a likable guy. I wanted Raheem Morris to succeed. We all wanted him to succeed. You can be a great defensive coach, even though I don't think Raheem Morris is that. Nothing has shown that he's a great defense coach. No. You can be a great positional coach in this league. But to be a great there's a million of those. To be a great head coach, there's 10 of those? Because it's way, way harder. Every single thing is under your hand, and you have to be responsible for the guys that you have in charge of those positions, for the things that you take control over. Everything is up to you. And this guy, it's not it. I'm sorry. It's not it. But if you want to give him another year, fine. We'll be here doing the same song and dance next year. Terry Fontenot, though, what do we do?
The worst thing I saw, it didn't even happen in the game. It happened after the game. And I can't believe more people aren't up in arms about this. We just gave up 44 points to, I mean, in terms of scoring offense, they're either bottom 3 or bottom 2, the Carolina Panthers are. We just gave up 44 points. There were reports that Raheem Morris took over a bigger role in the defense after the bye week. So we know Raheem Morris's and Jimmy Lake's defense gives up 44 points in a must-win game. Obviously, it didn't matter because the Bucs ended up winning, but let's just play the hypothetical. And so we lose this game, we miss the playoffs, sub 500. Instead of Raheem Morris going, this is completely unacceptable, this defense, my defense, no accountability whatsoever, is talking about the light at the end of the tunnel for having a franchise quarterback in Mike Penix. I read that as like, hey, Mr. Blank, I know I'm pissed off that he said that. He was like, I can tell you how pissed off I am, but I'm just so excited about that. That's a sales pitch. That is a used car salesman trying to distract you from bad car and telling you about a good franchise. Like, it was the grossest thing I've ever seen. It was a direct statement to Mr. Blank, basically what Arthur Smith was trying to do before he got fired, of like, hey, I just need a quarterback and then I can do it. Raheem Morris, you are the defensive mind. You are the sole perpetrator of this terrible defense, yet you are hiding behind a franchise quarterback. That is what he did. He is trying to pull Michael Penix in front of him to take attention away from his failures. It's gross.
Well, I mean, I all I can say, Alex, and I completely agree with you, is I told you so. What did I tell you when they signed Kirk Cousins and drafted Michael Penix? It was the safe route. They were always trying to get a buffer to get their a longer leash on their jobs. That is the number one thing for everybody in this Falcons building. They do not care about winning Super Bowls. They do not care about winning Super Bowls. They care about keeping their jobs. It's why they didn't hire Bill Belichick. It's why they drafted and spent $180 million on a quarterback, which has never been done. They can say whatever you want, but the proof is in the pudding, and that's just another comment that explains that point perfectly.